more than a day, interact with the people working in those pavilions because they are coming from their country. They are their country's ambassadors. In what they bring to the world. And I think that's the beauty of humanity. That if you peel away the passports, the, the nationalities, at the bottom, we're all the same. We all want to thrive in our own country. We can thrive in peace, dignity, equality, and healthy beings. And that's what I find is the beauty of life. It's not the buildings, it's the content.
Azazimanyiriza kw'amaanyi y'essenta tuzaalisa tukola antuneezo tujjanjala n'ekitegeezo kikola ky'okuzaabeerera nintendezi wano kyabwerere sisa tosasubira nekirala nameka batawulira Luganda okuwulira Oluzungu.
I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up. So if it's a woman, it has to be the whole process of
nation on the brink. The UN called for calm if India
activated trade by the best grade report.
A desperate humanitarian situation in Gaza, with food and supplies running out amid an ongoing blockade.
The challenges that we're facing are themselves constantly evolving,
Adapting to meet the needs of ever-changing missions. A conversation with the head of UN peacekeepers. Next.
now is the time for maximum restraint and stepping back from the brink. That has been my message in my ongoing outreach with both countries. Make no mistake, the military solution is not the solution.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres urging the escalation of tensions between India and Pakistan. The countries are locked in their communication in 2019. Last month, nearly 30 Indian tourists were killed in an attack on a resort. This week, India fired missiles into Pakistani-controlled territory in what New Delhi called retaliation. Islamabad called it an act of war. More than 30 people were killed. Pakistani officials have vowed a response, and observers fear the exchanges could lead to without conflict. India and Pakistan have long been at odds over the disputed Kashmir region, water rights, and other issues.
Four times in the period of time.
Diplomats here at the UN are pushing to the conflict between Israel and Hamas. It's been 2 months since Israel was humanitarian aid to Canada, creating a desperate situation for civilians.
We have heard from our partners in different sectors that they've distributed all they have. So there's no more to give. We've also heard from our colleagues on the ground that they observe people rummaging through garbage. Something. So that is the of the situation.
That's Jens Lerka, spokesperson for the UN's coordination office. Food and supplies are scarce inside Gaza. Israel appears to be preparing for another military offensive in the Palestinian territory. UN officials are rejecting a reported verbal offer from Israel to distribute aid in Gaza via Israeli hubs, saying it does not live up to humanitarian principles for independent aid delivery. The UN is urging Israel and Hamas to reach an immediate ceasefire and release all hostages.
We are asking those who are holding hostages, release those hostages. Because the families are suffering. To civilians, as you operate
whenever and wherever it happens. I'm David Durrett,
Conflict
along with
raged in
Canada.
Stafford
Smith,
East
Denver.
site. Thousands have died and more than 12 million people have been forced from their homes. The number of people seeking refuge in neighboring countries is surging. See, 18,000 survivors were dead in just the past 2 weeks. Chad has taken 800,000 refugees from 2023. Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the U.S. agenda.
Liberation from the
General Assembly President Columbia called on global leaders to embrace democracy. Anniversary and to Europe. United Nations is founded in that conflict.
now as a message
We can make a difference.
market.
AI develops government.
Coming up. The violence.
I believe that adapting
US forces. UN Insider. Is now facing
Immediately come out and immediately flop. Imekaa ila zinga ya kuhini. Ngoja mtoto ni watoto mshimameti. Nani nilikuwa sasa huyu anawa akachakura akatiwa. Sawa na mdusta. We got her into the transport within minutes of leaving the clinic. We knew that we were going to lose this baby, and I said that's
face many challenges. Changing policy dynamics.
Germany's defense ministry. Next week, this country will gathering on peacekeeping. The peacekeeping ministerial in Berlin will examine how the Blue Helmets can tackle the increasing challenges of their mandate and make adjustments for the future. There are currently 11 active peacekeeping missions around the globe. My colleague just sat down with Undersecretary General of Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix.
Let me just start with UNAID initiative. For UN peacekeeping operations, how are you going to adapt yourself to increase the efficiency for that initiative?
thank you for having me. And of course, the UNAT initiative, very important initiative by our Secretary General, and UNPCP intends to be fully supportive, fully involved, and committed to the success of this initiative. And I believe that adapting because the challenge that we face is evolving. This is why the Secretary General had launched the Action for Peacekeeping initiative, and this is why we're also working very hard on the future of peace, about which so level meeting in Berlin, Germany. We have to factor in people as this needs and just have to purpose of the impact of the new technologies. Of course, we have to also take into account the fact that we have like a time and international community. But in addition to that, we can still gather that financial resources are limited for people work towards having more cost-effective work. And so very much we can actively engage in supporting cost-effective can give us some examples. I think there are a couple of potential of capacity to technology help us do the same work, but also effective manner. Launch strategies for digital transformation and peacekeeping. Of course, one of the more effective cost effective. I believe that the other dimension is that it is very important that these birds do focus on where they have the outstanding value. Others they like what they can do, you know, added value. So these are, I believe, keeping measures on a regular basis. What we do sources are allocated and I want to insist that succeeding in successful cost effectiveness, all of this is a shared responsibility for us, but it's on the other hand, I believe that a number of how we allocate those and we could use some China said that very China's when it comes to I want to pay special tribute to them because they have been Lebanon. Here was the fire. So far, they can resist so highly appreciated. from China. People get this. So from the company, it's coming up. The RC has a lot of
against rebel groups. What is your take?
First of all, I think it's important to emphasize we have an area in the RC going to be offensive. On the other hand, more than 60% of the schools operating outside the
So it makes just ein so long.
If I take everything sort of area, these are now, in addition to that, is that they also the universal setting by but once the ceasefire is in place, then we will be there without what it ceasefire. So, coming up. UN Insider.
Were you worried about your life? About the
Both the states of the continent.
I think that's how it will catch the party, so.
About 70% of the freshwater water has no ice. Really rely on water from glaciers, snow melt, runoff, drinking water, agricultural energy. Glaciers are melting faster than ever. In 2023, glaciers lost more than 600 tons of water. This is the largest mass loss in 50 years. Around glaciers are shrinking or disappearing altogether. Mexico's Jalapa Glacier sits atop the country's highest peak, and it is melting. The glacier's degradation is impacting the surrounding communities in multiple ways.
And when you go through the door, that's the possibility.
This is the word standing high. Central plains of America stands 6 mountains. Also, 600 meters height. Mount Olympus of Mesoamerica. The face of the people is the Jalapa Glacier, existing glacier. Today it lies at just 48% of its original length. Still shrinking. Alfredo Moya is a local photographer who has spent the past decade observing the changes in the mountain. Glacier? Up the glacier, we have seen over the last 10 years how the ice has been retreating at increasingly faster rates. The crevasses on the glacier have become shallower. Before, the bottom of those cracks could not be seen. Now the bottoms are clearly visible. The glacier is wrinkly. And I think that I'm standing here just and when the clouds pass through, I know something water vapor. That sounds fine along the way. Each tree represents 300 cubic meters of water retention per year. But over why themselves are trailblazing innovation. How we could limit the technology even further.
There is an interesting that I'm green.
This running into the ocean way.
he went forward. Just look at it now. It's a massive just a minus. Oh, God. Region, flex, high strength densities. Water is first from New Jersey along the coast. Water here is scarce. They are impacted. This has been studied by West Tennessee University, director of the Mexican Hispanic University. Was spurred by the tapping of the Humapa River. The water was enough to supply the city. Notice that the water in the river is no longer enough because the Humapa River has been reduced to a thread of water. Facing to problems, the future looks bleak. The future looks very bad. Communities in the high mountains and other impacts the problem. We know that as we progress, time is becoming involved. Deforestation is reaching an industrial scale. It's going to get very difficult for the following generations. Maybe it won't affect us too much, but for those coming behind us, it's going to be very complicated in many different ways. Soil, resulting landslides, nothing will grow, the rise in temperatures. Just imagine it's going to be tough. Is public access to information. Small, marginal areas. We all ultimately share the same goal. Survival is
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for making UN Insider. Greece at the United Nations headquarters in New York. This is a special edition of UN
For the global audience to better understand that it's very important for the media to cover the United Nations, to seek to understand and tell the story in ways that the average person in the street can understand. Yeah, big important messages about the reality of these challenges.
UN Insider has come to the UN. So grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated to a TV program to what is happening in the UN. It is reaching so many people, as it says in its title, inside stories.
Right? And then compare the information. We think that it's no problem. What we
we are trying. We are necessary for protection.
Nobody covered tariffs, burns, content, included everything. My when you become, I think I think so. This is what's in the financial became so we could be we will get a
done due regard to international standard. Carry out extractive industries, and you still have more issues like forced sterilization of fetuses, for which a number of states
kiganiro umutima mwiza wo kuyamba abana bamaze bongera ko bari mu kubana na mama batese kubana na mama abatari n'amani kugenda bose abatari n'amabwe n'amani urubuga rwacu dufite bakikora mama ndababona tukira kubona ukubima bitewe no gukiriza imbere y'abayisine nayo ukubimo
Apparently, personal trees have a lifespan of between 50 and 75 years. So I hope that it will grow to become those big trees that will survive 75 years or even 80 years. And then many people will be able to enjoy the fruits of this tree, which is now a symbol of peace and, of course, resilience.
I hope as these saplings grow, so too will our aspirations for peace spread and become a reality. I sincerely hope Hibakushu planted here will stand as a symbol of this spirit.
It is very difficult to really imagine and understand what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 80 years ago. But I think what we all need to remember is that we can make peace and build peace if we are together. And as you can imagine, the United Nations is a place where people and countries come together and then work together to make that the objectives. From Chigoku to the ocean, nothing remains. On the debris strewn red earth. In the silence that came with time, shoots with elliptic leaves to 5 bright petals. A vivid signal that survival is the future. That through resilience we find a peace and learn that for no other reason it should ever happen again.
I'm trying before he died. Have you still got a pain? You got a pain? No, it's coming.
His Holiness Pope Francis was a man of faith and a bridge builder among all faiths. He was a champion of the most marginalized people on earth. He was a voice of community in a world of division, a voice of mercy in a world of cruelty, in a world of war.
That excited seeing him like coming out. All in fire, you never leave that. Nobody would ever leave that. That's hard.
All the atrocities
on
and
the day.
order to preserve and order protecting life and property.
That's why I'm alive.
Some other countries, they went to my country, and so they are sentenced to go to their spaces.
Seeing to the states, skipping 24 years later, free states of the way, security. What you see, that's flag going to your election town, you know, that you want to fight out.
Today, how you are, then okay, willing. And never forget it. Thank you for being thankful.
gauche-à-droite, là, soulèvement de la population, beaucoup de casse, mais l'esprit professionnel des Okapiens, les techniciens d'Okapi, multimédia, broadcasting, on est là. Il faudrait que l'élite congolaise, l'intelligence congolaise puisse apporter sa contribution à la recherche de solutions. Ce n'est pas la première crise, hein. Ça fait 23 ans que Radio Okapi existe et Radio Okapi a survécu à toutes les crises en respectant la déontologie et l'éthique journalistique.
Le chef de l'État congolais Félix Tshisekedi s'est adressé hier à la radio a pris toutes les auditeurs ne soient pas privés de l'information, la vraie information certifiée.
Les infos sont passées au pain fin parce que dans une période de crise comme celle-ci, un mot de trop, un mot de moins, une période déplacée, ça peut embrasser le pays. Donc, nous travaillons sur tous ces aspects-là et je voudrais surtout relever le travail en équipe. Un très grand travail d'équipe est fait. Personne ne travaille en électron libre et c'est ça, je crois, qui fait notre force.
À la fois, nous sommes entre les appels dans une île qui n'est pas connectée à Internet. On est obligé de fouiller ici et là pour trouver des sources, mais que tout cela soit équilibré. Et avec aussi cette pression gouvernementale, nous nous rassurons que tout ce que nous disons comme information répond aux questions essentielles, mais également une information qui ne doit pas faire du mal aux membres de la communauté et qui est là pour connaître l'unité et le développement de la région. On se retrouve toujours
In 2021, Anna and
Servir 24 heures sur 24 parce que c'est le travail qu'on a choisi.
You start to see where certain types of weapons were employed, certain types of ammunition in those weapons, and the impacts that they had on people and property.
This new organ is going to be the holy grail of what we can do to improve human health around the world.
The student-led protest in Bangladesh, it was the interim government itself that requested the deployment of a fact-finding wing to Bangladesh. The team visited hotspots, sites of protests in universities. We also received 900 submissions from individuals.
Human rights experts and investigators who conduct interviews and looking at the information received. We have some key areas here. A shooter and trying to triangulate and cross-check the information to see exactly what happened.
Understanding how the security forces themselves consider their roles and their functions and their powers in a crowd control situation is very important.
I was able to go to hospitals, the mode of injury, the mode of death.
Shotguns for demonstration controls. The shotguns were aimed at the chest and the heads of
The testimonies and the evidence that we gathered paint a disturbing picture of rampant state violence, targeted killings that are among the most serious violations of human rights and which may also constitute international crimes.
These violations were carried out with the knowledge, inclination, and direction of the former political leadership and senior security officials. It's a specific goal of suppressing protests and keep the former government's grip on power.
And the composition of the gas microbiota and how unique it can be.
Think about that has a direct impact on our overall health.
In a healthy adult, the gut microbiome is like a 20-foot long and Amazon rainforest, which flourishes all its life, providing that diverse functions to sustain a life with limited experiments on the depleted health and lifestyle.
आज का दिन मेरे लिए क्योंकि मैंने अपने देखा मेरा शहर भारत करने में राष्ट्र होगा क्योंकि आज का दिन
state eight not just any we have been visiting 9 stations that are critical for the functioning of the safe functioning of and of course the situation is quite dire. Chosen because of its importance in terms of functioning of the grid here in Ukraine. It has a strategic value, and as you can see, it has been damaged quite significantly. We are, of course, aware of this project about Khmelnytsky 3-4, 2 units that one has to say have started, the construction has started. 80.
यदि इतने कम समय में ब्रह्मोस की इंटीग्रेशन एंड जस्टिस सोसाइटी की स्थापना हो सकी तो इसके पीछे योगी जी का बहुत बड़ा योगदान। मैं हमारे वैज्ञानिक, हमारे इंजीनियर्स और इस प्रोजेक्ट से जुड़े हर व्यक्ति और संस्था को मैं हृदय से बधाई देता हूँ। आप लोगों ने दिन रात मेहनत करी इस इंटीग्रेशन एंड जस्टिस सोसाइटी को खड़ा किया। स्वर्ग वैज्ञानिक, इंजीनियर और युवा डिफेंस कॉरिडोर के विजन को लेकर तो उस समय हमारे सामने आने वाले समय में e-commerce के नए इसे मैनचेस्टर ऑफ द ईस्ट कहा जाता है, लेकिन आजादी के बाद अनेक कारणों से आज प्रगति की राह में यह क्षेत्र क्षमता ले रहा है।
I learned today of the construction completed in the Qatar phase of the whole unit 25%. So there is quite an effort and an investment has already been done. It's already started some analytical work on the specific areas.
Hello from the SDG studio here at United Nations headquarters in New York. Welcome to this anniversary declaration development and program action. This event is organized by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in collaboration with the United Nations University Development Economics Research for NIDA. My name is Nicola Sachs. Moderating today highlight contributions of the Copenhagen Declaration to the Global Sustainable Development Agenda. We'll look at what progress has been made, the challenges we face, what actions are needed to accelerate progress towards the commitments made at the Copenhagen Summit in 1995 and the set of sustainable development goals, SDGs. We did by exploring new evidence and analysis from then we have a high-level panel to talk about major events later this year. Fourth International Conference on Financing for Development in Seville, Spain, and the Second World Summit for Social Development. How can these events help strengthen the social dimension of sustainable development and progress towards the SDGs? Let's first find out about the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development, signed at the World March 12, 1995. For the first time in history, all leaders gathered to recognize the significance of social development and human well-being for all, and to give these goals the highest priority into the 21st century. Never before had so many world leaders come together for such a purpose, to fight poverty, to create decent work, and to strengthen the social fabric. The central tenet of the Copenhagen people at the center of development efforts. At the summit, governments committed to a progressively fairer distribution of opportunities and resources to foster social justice and equality. They also called for greater inclusion and participation of all people, economic, social, and political processes. In terms of goals, the Copenhagen Declaration aims to ensure the well-being of all people and the harmonious functioning of society. Full employment and social integration. The Copenhagen Summit also stands out as a political will shown by governments to comprehensively tackle social challenges with the recognition that social development piecemeal fashion. Rather, it requires an orientation of values, objectives, and priorities towards the well-being of all. It was also at the summit that world leaders clearly stated that economic development, social development, and environmental protection are interdependent and mutually reinforcing components of sustainable development. And the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development builds on the principles established in the Copenhagen Declaration. It incorporates a broad approach to sustainable development with 3 dimensions: economic, social, and environmental. The commitments made in the Copenhagen Declaration are reflected in the SDGs, particularly in the goals related to poverty reduction, decent work, and reduced inequalities. The principle of people-centered development is also echoed in the 2030 Agenda's commitment to leave no one behind. The Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development was a significant milestone in the pursuit of global social progress by addressing key social issues and promoting inclusive, sustainable development. The declaration laid the foundation for a better quality of life for all people. Its principles and commitments continue to inspire efforts to create a more equitable and just world now and in the future. And now we have a video message from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development.
Together, we can build a better world for all humanity. That conviction is at the foundation of the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development, adopted 30 years ago. And it runs through the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Yet, today, life is marked by uncertainty and insecurity, fueling frustration and division. As this year's World Social Report shows, inequality, insecurity, and deep distrust are rife across the world. Countless people are struggling to make ends meet, while wealth and power concentrate at the top. Our planet is suffering from climate disasters, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Along with economic shocks and conflict, these continue to erase hard-won development gains. And while new technologies are creating new possibilities but dividing people, such challenges demand collective solutions. In this 30th anniversary of the Copenhagen Declaration, we have an important opportunity to drive progress, the Second World Summit for Social Development. Let's keep working together to make the most of that important gathering and help build a more just, secure, and united world that we so desperately need.
As the Secretary General said, insecurity and deep distrust is rife across the world. That's echoed in the findings of the World Social Report 2025, titled A New Policy Consensus to Accelerate Social Progress. Let's dive into the World Social Report now, which is UNDESA's flagship publication on social issues. For the first time, the 2025 edition is a joint product of UNDESA and UNU-WIDER. We have its lead authors with us today to talk about the report's main findings and messages. Here in the studio with me is Marta Roach, Chief of the Emerging Issues and Trends in Development section at UNDESA. And joining us virtually from Helsinki, Finland, we have Patricia Justino, Deputy Director of UNU-WIDER. Welcome to you both. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. So Marta, first question to you. How is this year's World Social Report different from previous editions?
Sure. Thanks so much, Shax. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So this World Social Report has a very long history in the UN, but this edition is different because of its timing. This year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Copenhagen Declaration for Social Development, which was signed this month in March in 1995. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to take stock of how far we have come, what challenges remain, but also what new challenges have arisen that were not there in. Of course, this means looking back at progress making the commitments that were made in Copenhagen, including poverty eradication, the promotion of productive employment and decent work, and social integration, not least because these commitments have not been met yet. But also, as I said, and chief among them is the decline social polarization that we are witnessing right now, but also increasing insecurity. People are uncertain about the future more and more, and persistent inequality. So now, as member states prepare for the second World Summit for Social Development, we thought it would be important to present a broad assessment, facts-based situation. Share with us the report's key findings in terms of data. What are the standout numbers?
Thank you. Let me first start with the good news. The good news is that the world has made extraordinary social and economic progress over the last 30 years. And this is especially so in the fight against extreme poverty. Since 1995, more than 1 million people have escaped extreme poverty. This is a very impressive number. And even so, when we think about all the setbacks that we faced since 1995, more recently now the pandemic. However, it's not rosy, and as we have in our report, a lot of people in the world don't feel that progress. Around 40% of the world's population believes that life is worse now than it was 50 years ago. We try to understand why this is the case, and three main reasons come forward. The very first one is it is clear not everyone has shared the benefits of progress. Inequality remains very high, both within and between countries. And currently, 2/3 of the world population live in countries where income inequality has increased since 1995. The second reason is economic insecurity, and it's widespread. This is for various reasons: conflicts, climate threats, recent economic crisis. They have shown that a large fraction of the world population is only one shock away from poverty. This is true both in developed and developing countries. This is not just a problem of developing countries. And across the world, millions struggle to make ends meet. And then what we observe on top of this is this high levels of inequality, the economic insecurity that people perceive to be in is fueling distrust and is leading to lower social cohesion. Distrust in government is widespread, distrust in other institutions as well. And this is deepening social and political divides and increasing social polarization across the world. So what essentially what we show in the report is that we seem to be trapped in a vicious cycle with economic insecurity, inequality, declining trust, and social fragmentation feeding on each other. And ultimately, this vicious cycle is threatening social contracts and the foundations of global solidarity and multilateralism overall.
I'm going to be talking about that issue of declining trust soon. First, Marta, please tell us what are the main findings of the report with regards to policy? Yes. So many see these social challenges that Patricia has described, or let's call it a social crisis, because we are facing a social crisis, as the result of the recent wave of shocks, mostly the pandemic. But also other economic shocks that came as a result of the pandemic and then recent geopolitical conflicts. A key message of the report is that these social challenges have been a long time in the making. That the rapid process of globalization and the pace of technological change as well benefited for sure many people, but also unsettled lives and societies and the planet itself. So another key message of the report, though, is that the social crisis was not inevitable. That in fact, policy choices on occasion, instead of making things better, made things worse. That of course, yes, technological change has pushed inequality upwards, but there have been certain policies that have made the effects of technological change even worse, to put an example. So how do we fix this? How do we repair the social contract, which is what needs to be repaired? The key message from the report is that small fixes won't be sufficient, that we cannot just patch holes with small programs here and there until the next crisis hit, that we need a complete shift in policies and even in norms and mindsets. So a deep rethink of policy frameworks so that we can strengthen resilience instead of going from shock to shock, from crisis to crisis.
What to do very shortly. Let's go back to what you were telling us about that decline in trust, Patricia. And this fall in trust is an issue as far as governments go, how people see their governments, but also between people, right? What's going on?
Yes, so this is one of the big messages of the report. We observe a decline in trust almost in all regions in the world over the last 20 years. And obviously this is a problem. Trust is a key pillar of social cohesion. So without trust, without social trust, people are less likely to comply with the rules of society. Things like anything from paying taxes to obeying the law to recycling are affected by changes in trust. And without trust in others, cooperation and communication across different social groups becomes extremely difficult. What we show is today, more than half of the population in the world have little or no trust in their governments. And what is more concerning is the fact that this number has been increasing from cohort to cohort. So from one generation to the next generation. About a quarter of people that were born in the 1990s, which are now in their 20s, early 30s, have no trust whatsoever in their governments. And so if this trend continues the way it is, we will see the emerging of societies which are less and less trusting. And like you said, Shaks, this is not just about institutions, it's also about people. Trust in people is also low. Less than 30% of people think that others in their society, in their communities can be trusted. These are very low numbers. One concerning feature is we have observed some of these declines in trust in the past, but what we're observing today is this form of polarization is becoming more entrenched, and disagreements are turning into animosity, and more we have these discourses about us versus the others, and distrusting those that are not like us, that do not look like us, that do not behave like us. And of course, I mean, a lot has been said about the role of digital technologies in explaining some of these trends. We all know the potential that gets uncovered by advances in digital technologies, but they are also contributing to this erosion in social cohesion and trust. We've been talking a long time about widespread mis and disinformation, fueling social and political polarization, obstructing positive public dialogue and civic participation. And the thing at the end of the day is that how people feel about their own lives and how people feel about the world around them matters for trust. And this also includes how they perceive their institutions and their governments to be delivering on their promises. For instance, one thing that we show in the result is a strong correlation between perceptions of inequality and trust in institutions. And there's also a strong relationship between how people perceive their own economic situation. And we, as I mentioned before, this comes with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of economic insecurity. And the relationship between that and trust is there. And we can't claim, we're not making claims of causality, but we show very, very strong correlations between how people feel and how that gets translated into their levels of trust. So, I mean, Marta mentioned already, this is something that concerns not just to governments, but also to the international community in general.
So what do we do about this? The report is calling for a new policy consensus. Marta, what should that new consensus consist of?
Well, we think based on the analysis in the report that a new policy consensus should be based on three broad and mutually reinforcing principles: equity, economic security for everyone, and solidarity. So what does this mean in practice? Let's start with equity. Equity requires investing more and better in people. And I'm using the word investment purposely because usually we talk about social expenditure as it's something that you spend and it has no returns, but social investments have large returns in the long term, right? So investing more and better means investing in services and making sure that they work for everyone. By services, I mean education, health, and other services. Investing in social protection systems as well, eliminating the barriers that prevent people from participating in social, economic, and political life. That's just some examples. What does it mean to promote economic security for all? Well, you have to make sure that people are resilient and thus protected against crisis. That we are not only protecting markets when a crisis hits or banks, but we are protecting people. But also that you're giving people opportunities. And the best way to give people opportunities is through making true on that promise of promoting productive employment and decent work for all, for example. And then there's the issue of solidarity and distrust. That requires more than better policies alone, right? That requires action by all stakeholders in society. It has to be a whole of society effort because you need to change norms and mindsets. So civil society, the private sector, large corporations in particular, which have a lot of power. Everybody needs to work in sync to promote solidarity and trust. So overall, maybe the main message from the report here is that social policies are extremely important in this new policy consensus, but by themselves are not sufficient. What you need is a whole of government integrated policy framework, which Copenhagen already promoted 30 years ago, and which still haven't made true, and to make sure that all policies work together, that we don't have microeconomic policies that are undoing the effect of social policies, for instance, because everything is linked. Everything is linked. If you have a taxation policy that's making the poor poorer, while you're giving transfer to people in poverty so they can escape poverty, you are not doing anything in the end. So you just said that we need a whole of society, whole of government approach. Patricia, clearly governments alone cannot solve the complex social challenges that we face today, can they?
No, that's the straightforward answer. Governments alone cannot face these challenges. We're talking about climate change, conflicts. The numbers show that the period between 2020 and 2023 was the most violent since the Cold War. Pandemics, economic recessions. These are global challenges that require global solutions. There's not a single government that will be able to address this on their own. And these are challenges that are not contained within borders. They affect us all, independently of borders. But sadly, what we're observing is instead of striving to find global solutions that work for all, what we're observing is the rise of nationalistic policies, inward-looking governments across the world. And this is not helping, and the challenges are becoming more entrenched and difficult to address. And what it does show is, at the moment, the international community is really at a critical juncture. We now know that the world is off track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And we will not be back on track if we do not find ways of increasing essentially global cooperation. In the recently signed Pact for the Future in September at the UN General Assembly, member states have recommitted to urgently accelerate progress towards achieving the SDGs. The member states have pledged to a new beginning in multilateralism, I'm quoting, based and striving for a stronger multilateral system. I do hope that this pledge takes place, even though what we're observing in the world today seems that we are moving away from it, even though this pledge was made 6 months ago, or less than 6 months ago. But this is not just a pledge made by governments in isolation. This involves us, the United Nations, the global international community, but also every single citizen in the world. Everyone needs to play their role if we are to get back on track and in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030.
I have a question for you both. How do you think international organizations, including the UN, should support national efforts to tackle inequality and social fragmentation? Marta, we could start with you first.
Sure. So we are presenting findings from the World Social Report. That's one way in which the UN can help through the production of data, knowledge, and policy guidance that can help governments, implement more effective policies. That's one. The other one is obviously coordination and cooperation. As Patricia said, many of today's challenges are global. And let's not think only of the most obvious ones, such as climate change, but even inequality within countries. Many of the drivers of inequality within countries are global. Global financial flows, trade flows, labor regulations that don't depend only on one government, but are at the end are set in a global context, right? All these things require coordination and cooperation. So the UN provides the global convening space for member states to come together and align their efforts, or at least discuss disagreements and agree to disagree. But at least also I would say that the UN is not only a global convener, but it also can open and amplify the voices of people and groups of people that are usually excluded from political debates. So that one. Another one would be accountability, right? Like the UN can help countries set measurable targets and monitor progress towards those targets. The UN cannot replace national governments, obviously, but it can make their policies more effective so that they can create more sustainable social frameworks.
Patricia, what do you think? How can the UN and other international organizations support national efforts?
Well, I mean, Marta covered quite a lot of ground, but what I would emphasize is the importance of the United Nations as a convener and facilitating dialogue, and especially between countries or social groups that disagree. What we're observing through whatever the reasons this is happening, whatever the pathways we're seeing whereby this is happening, mistrust is becoming more and more entrenched. Social polarization, this idea that I mentioned before of us versus the others. These problems cannot be solved unless dialogue happens. People listen to the other side of the argument in a positive way, and promoting dialogue and debate is critical to how the United Nations operates. Like Marta mentioned, the United Nations is not going to replace governments, not going to replace national leadership, but it can sort of create a pathway by mediating disagreements and often tensions as well. And this role is fundamental in creating this safe space where different people with different opinions can come together, hopefully to find an agreement.
Well, as you both said, you at least need to have somewhere to come together, even if it is just to agree to disagree. Now, we know that accurate data is so important to sound decision making. Marta, how can this year's World Social Report help inform the discussions that are taking or will take place at the second World Summit for Social Development being held in Doha in November?
Sure. So actually in the report, we include some concrete proposals or recommendations for the World Social Summit. But let me say first that the objectives set in the first Copenhagen Summit in 1995 and those in the Agenda 2030 are as relevant today as they were when they were set. And they have not been met. And the same with the principles that were agreed to in those two summits. So we have the how. The what, we have the what. We have the what, we have the objectives. What we need to figure out is the how
to accelerate progress, but not only to accelerate progress, to make sure that progress is sustained in the long term. Because there have been periods of accelerated progress in the past, but then we go back to zero when the next crisis hits. So we need to make sure that progress is sustainable. So what recommendations do we make in the World Social Report? In a few words, one is, I had talked earlier about investing better in people. So one way to do so is by making sure that services are not only accessible, public services accessible to people, but they are of good quality. The summit can provide a platform to agree on financial and also technical cooperation that is needed to strengthen the institutions that can provide these services. That's one. Another one is the long standing commitment to promoting decent work, which is a very, very important one. One government alone has limited power to improve the working standards and the working conditions of workers in their country. You need this global platform to coordinate action, to agree to invest in labor market institutions, right? And to agree on a certain labor standards that should be met by all countries. So that's another one. A third one is social protection. We are still far from the goal of universal social protection. Some countries can finance universal social protection systems by their own. They can bridge the gap with domestic resources, but maybe many low-income countries cannot. So hopefully the World Summit can result in concrete commitments to help these countries that cannot provide social protection on their own, and maybe concrete commitment to debt relief, which is so important for these countries also to move forward. There's two other recommendations that we make, and thus are even more important than this. We need integrated whole of government policies to address the social challenges we face today. We cannot stay at sectoral policies. Yes, health policies are very important, educational policies are very important, but we need a whole of government approach to address these challenges. And we need more than that. We need a whole of society approach, as we said earlier. Every individual must be involved. And the last thing is that what's important about policies is not only how policies are designed, what policy agreements we make here, but how policies are implemented, right? And here, what we need to make sure is that the people affected by the policies that will be put in place, affected or who will benefit from them, have a say on how these policies will be implemented, that at least they are on board with them, that the policies, when they are implemented, will not lead to large protests because they have unintended impacts. So hopefully the World Social Summit can open spaces for deliberation, not only here at the intergovernmental level, but at the national level as well.
One last question for you both. What is one big takeaway from the report that policymakers and other stakeholders should pay attention to? Patricia, over to you first.
Well, we have talked about very difficult issues, and the report and this discussion has not painted the brightest of pictures, right? But we should not lose sight of the reasons for the Copenhagen Declaration in '95 and the 2030 Agenda. These challenges, these global challenges cannot be solved if we lose our sense of equity, of security, of solidarity to guide policies and institutional transformation alike. But the things we're talking about, inequality, insecurity, social fragmentation, etc., people often think about that as abstract issues. And it's difficult to grasp. Most people, if asked, will find it very difficult to say how much inequality is there in their country. And this has been shown. But the fact is, all these factors shape our daily lives in very real ways that sometimes are not quite grasped. And but at the end of the day, what I think one of the key messages of the report is despite all these abstract discussions, despite all the tremendous challenges we face, we cannot lose sight of the individual. At the end of the day, what all we're discussing is about ordinary people and how people feel about these global problems, but how do they feel, how do these problems manifest themselves in their day-to-day lives? And these are the voices that need to be at the table, and they need to be heard. games, going back to what I said before, this is definitely one of the roles the UN can play, because if voices do not get heard and they don't get heard in a positive way, the negative messages take over, and those are the ones that dominate. And if we don't pay attention to the realities of people's lives and people telling us, yes, my life is more difficult now than it was decades ago, well, we might be moving into a much darker place. And so it's important that we pay attention to how these global problems manifest themselves in just ordinary events on a day-to-day basis.
Lisa, what do you think? I know Patricia has provided a very exhaustive answer just to illustrate what she's saying. In a global survey on life satisfaction, 60% of people say they are struggling. Let's listen to that. 12% say that they are more than suffering. So 3/4 of the world population is either struggling or suffering, or that's how they feel, right? So we have to listen to that. And yes, the issues we analyze in the report may seem very abstract, but insecurity is affecting everyone. We see it every day. There's a growing gig economy where people work from day to day without knowing how many hours they will have of work tomorrow. That affects families. And that's people feel that they are just one step away. They lose their job. They don't have social protection. They are one step away from falling into poverty. Inequality, again, a very abstract term. Nobody will know how high inequality is in their country. But we present evidence of the fact that inequality has negative impacts on, say, economic stability or social mobility, or that in countries with high inequality, wealthy individuals and corporations tend to capture political process and manipulate them towards their interests. So all these things have very practical implications on people's lives. I would just say what Patricia said, that the vision of the Agenda 2030 in Copenhagen remain within reach, but only if we have equality, economic security, and solidarity at the top of the policy agendas of every country. Ladies, thank you both very much indeed for that very illuminating conversation. Now, 2025 is a hallmark year to advance the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals. From November 4th to the 6th, the world will gather in Doha, Qatar for the second World Summit for Social Development. The summit aims to continue the work started by the 1995 Copenhagen Summit, focusing on advancing global efforts to create a more inclusive and fairer world. The Social Summit will address the gaps and recommit to the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development and the Program of Action and its implementation, and give momentum towards the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The second World Summit for Social Development is expected to adopt a concise, action-oriented political declaration. The President of the General Assembly has appointed the permanent representatives of Belgium and Morocco to facilitate the intergovernmental negotiations in an open and transparent manner. The Social Summit will convene just a few months after the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. That's being held in Seville, Spain from June 30th to July 3rd this year. That conference will be attended by leaders from governments, along with international and regional organizations, financial and trade institutions, businesses, civil society, and the UN system at the highest levels. It's the only space where all these different stakeholders will come together, and it will provide a unique opportunity to improve financing at all levels, including supporting reform of international financial architecture. Joining me now in the studio is the Trinhua Under Secretary General of UNDESA, His Excellency Omar Hilal, permanent representative of the Kingdom of Morocco to the United Nations, Her Excellency Alia Ahmed Saif Al Thani, permanent representative of the State of Qatar to the United Nations, and His Excellency Hector Jose Gomez Menendez, permanent representative of Spain to the United Nations. And joining us online from Santiago, Chile, we have His Excellency Juan Somavia, former permanent representative of Chile to the United Nations. He's also a former Director General of the International Labour Organization and an honorary member of the Club de Madrid. A very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for being here with us. Mr. Lee, we could start with you, please. What role will the Second World Summit for Social Development and the Fourth International Conference on Financing for Development play to help advance the sustainable development goals?
Well, thank you. Certainly from Copenhagen's first World Social Summit to the Addis Ababa Action Agenda in 2015 and also the 2030 Agenda. All those events are landmark events for UN leadership that are on the Sustainable Development Cooperation. So now we are going to have the Second World Social Summit. The momentum from the first summit, we also need to discuss what we have achieved, what is left behind, and what will be forward. So I certainly believe first World Social Summit leaders put the people at the center of the whole process. And then for the 2030, we definitely follow that, follow the quarter of the core. So I believe over the past several years, based on our assessment, there are a number of very impressive progress. But also, we are facing very challenges like the insecurity, for instance, like economic uncertainties, for instance, like the lower trust on the government and public institutions. And then also, we need to talk about how we could further generate decent jobs for our people, particularly for young people. So all those things need to be further elaborated at the leaders level, at the ministerial level, to integrate the policy from the every link of the social agenda. So I'm definitely believe that when the leaders adopt this political declaration, then they are going to map out the new chart for all of us to move the needle forward in all those dimensions, from the sense of the security, from increase the social trust on the public institutions, and then also to mobilize the more investment on social pillar. And since we are moving from the Seville to Doha, then I definitely believe those two landmark events will be intertwined with each other. Success for the Seville conference will certainly laid on a very solid foundation for the success in Doha. Vice versa, the success in Doha will be further amplified the success in Seville. So that's why we certainly call on the all stakeholders to engage with them to launch this landmark process, to recommit ourselves to multilateralism and to reshape the course of action.
That's all time. Qatar is hosting the Second World Summit for Social Development. Why is this summit important to your country?
Thank you so much. Pleased to be here with your colleagues. First, for the last 3 decades, the state of Qatar has invested in the socio-economic part of the UN agenda. And of course, we have offered this resources to achieve these objectives. 5 major UN conferences were held in Doha. From the second United Nations Conference on the Financing for Development in 2008 until the most recent UN conference we have hosted in Doha in 2023, which is the 5th United Nations Conference on the least developed countries. We're very proud, of course, that Doha is the host of the Second World Summit for Social Development. This is a very important moment. So again, it's an opportunity after to bring momentum to our commitment to the Copenhagen Plan of Action, and as well as an opportunity to adopt a new outcome that will recognize the achievement of the 2030 agenda, as well the very much excited, engaged with European Secretariat and the leadership of the General, General, the General, to ensure the summit is a big success. We are expecting over 40,000 people to participate. This will be among the class of the most major UN conferences to be held from member states, society, agencies, academia, private sector. We're very, for us, it's very important to do this summit, do a result-driven summit. This is a key objective for us. Ambassador Aldiu and the permanent representative of Belgium have appointed to facilitate intergovernmental negotiations for the summit in Doha. In your opinion, what is the value of the Copenhagen Declaration program of action for that upcoming summit?
Well, I would like to thank good friends, Lee and his department for celebrating this 80th moment. And our meeting today is only the 50th anniversary and renew the spirit of Copenhagen, spirit of commitment that represents social development, which is needed today more than any time. 10 years ago, Copenhagen Summit marked a light of hope and unequivocal call to action. Leaders of that era were really revolutionary people because they shared common vision of eradicating poverty, secure for employment, and foster true social integration. And they agreed that social development cannot and social justice cannot be obtained without in absence of peace, in absence of justice, in absence of respect of human rights. So this ideals and principles of Copenhagen, 30 years after, they are still valid. They are still pertinent. And we have to continue keeping working on them and improve them and enlarge them for the whole population. But how we see this continue in the principles is we need more engagement. These commitments are also crucial to face several existing and emerging challenges: climate crisis, digital divide, global health emergencies, economic shocks, geopolitical tension in the world or around the world, and solidarity erosion. These challenges and unfinished business of Copenhagen, and I'm sorry to use unfinished business because that's the fact. It's not. We would be very happy to say that everything was successful and mission accomplished, but we have to recognize that there is still a lot to do. So we have to, the fact that Copenhagen was not, all the principles and the outcome of Copenhagen was not finished, I think it's challenging multilateralism. It's also testing our resilience. It's also mobilizing our social fabric, and we shall do the necessary effort and action to be up to the test. Today, as we honor the legacy of Copenhagen, the Second World Summit for Social Development shall embrace audacious vision for the future. We need collective commitment. We need political will. We need more solidarity. And we need the fact that the world has to change in a better way. As we are shaping the path toward the summit, let's make of this intergovernmental process a turning point, a moment when we transform values and principles into innovative action that tackle the challenges of today. The summit shall be also a vehicle to create an environment for building trust, give momentum to the agenda, innovative solutions, and increasing international cooperation. Of Morocco and Belgium as co-facilitators have done not to join efforts in the governmental process of this historic summit that will take place in Doha. Ambassador Smith and I remain committed and dedicated to facilitate the governmental negotiation with transparency with the aim to achieve an outcome that is forward-looking, action-oriented, and consensus-driven.
Thank you. So as we're hearing Ambassador Gomez, the social summit and the financing for development conference that Spain is hosting present key opportunities to drive progress for sustainable development goals. How do you think these meetings can reinforce each other and generate political momentum, as Ms. Lee was saying, and secure sustainable financing for social development?
Today, it's a great initiative to watch how to assess the process. An open thing which all come to an end, and which and the space, security, dialogue, and reduced. So that was an opportunity for getting into the international arena. Basically, there were environments in Rio, Beijing, women in Beijing, and the social stuff. The way it happened was very interesting because the Secretary General, once this was proposed, asked me to consult. And I consulted in his name for about 6 or 7 months. And the result was that it wasn't that it was a gigantic crisis, but everybody knew that you had social problems. And they were given a sort of developmental dimension. The need today is completely different, very well described by the Summit of the Future. But the sense of discontent, polarization, understanding. We were talking before about the UN talking and communicating, and we know how difficult it is to become much more difficult. And yet we have to persist. And the situation of the UN then was also different. Then there was the notion that we be thinking about social development. Naturally, there was trust. And it was natural. Today it's also natural. The commissioning of the UN is really obviously on security matters because of the situation of the Security Council. But if you take a look at the spaces you can see that those are discovered by social issues is not exactly the same level of criticism as before, and I will go into that. And that was trusted. So what do you do in that context? In Copenhagen, it was very clear. Full support, full political support to the fact that the UN has the nations in the education system, it's a social development. And we weren't calling it then that bad. So many countries at the summit, that was more important than the security issues that were discussed. And continues to be so. Because people perceive the issues that people have dealt with social nation. I think that is probably the most important thing that we should draw people. towards control and security mandate is a social development. Of things that are being in all of the specialized stages this one's approach is part of it. It's first maybe one of so if we can understand of what we're doing, and I'm doing more than the subjects themselves. We get things I believe that that would be at least central visualization of the fact that the system social mandate and that social mandate should have this the meeting space and for many much more important space than security issues. Now, the success of a summit is also linked to something that is very important. Many people go there. The fact that this was the first social summit, and that there were, everybody was considering that things needed to be addressed, well, made the social summit in Copenhagen the biggest meeting of heads of state and prime ministers in the history of the UN at the time. We have an important presence. What would happen if the presence is extremely important? We say that the people, all of these heads of state and prime ministers have got to do it. Because this is the key point we want to reinforce by the United Nations. Issue that is linked to people's interests, to individuals, families, communities. And that's why we're here. We're going to have a good declaration that I have no doubt it's a very good piece. But a declaration that is approved by a lot of prime ministers would have an enormous impact. So the content, but also the participation, I think is going to be an essential point. And I am certain that there are a lot of people that want to go there, but it also, you have to sell the product. It's part of the amount of things that presidents have to do. And after the General Assembly that's going to take place 2 months before, it's something that I think that we have to put a lot of emphasis on.
So Hilal, back to you. So what are the next steps in the political process for the Senate?
In our mind, we have already prepared the photos. The reaction that we got, first reaction that was very encouraging. And we consider that the declaration will be like for advancing social development in line with the mandate by the General Assembly. We are now at a very important and crucial moment of the process. We will have a meeting of member states on 28th to listen to their reactions. And 2 weeks after, we will present draft 0. That will be a moment of truth. So we are expecting things to go smoothly because we have been working since the beginning in very transparent and inclusive manner. And as I said a few minutes ago, we have been in Geneva. We intend to go to Nairobi. We will go to Paris to meet with UNESCO, Nairobi with the Habitat, because all the UN agencies that are handling one of the aspects of the social development will be visited, and we will meet their members, and we will listen to their advices and recommendations. And of course, the civil society is included in our conduct because we want to listen to the whole component. For example, in Geneva last week, we met with the High Commissioner for Refugees, because refugees are very important elements of the puzzle. We met with the High Commission for Human Rights. By preparing the food for thought, we have taken the decision to not let anything aside or to consider any issue as taboo. That's why I think we got a very positive reaction. And of course, we believe that we are just facilitators. We present the documents, and in the end, it's the room that will decide how the document will be, which content the document will have. But on this issue, we will do our best to reduce gaps, to convince people for more flexibility, to ask them to show their career, and also to put them behind their responsibilities, because they have to be adopted by consensus. And the time for negotiations will be from April till end of June, beginning of July, and we intend to finish our work at this time. It's a goal that needs the collaboration and the cooperation of all everybody. We remain in this process. We have to be optimistic. It doesn't mean that the rest of the world is as optimistic as we are. As we say to my colleague Victor, we will depend on the result of the outcome of Sevilla. And as the Secretary General, good friend Lee, he said, the success of Sevilla will impact the success of Doha, and the success on Doha will amplify. It's the word that will amplify what have been decided in Sevilla and what will be decided in the future. So there is a continuum, and there is everything is interlinked. And the fact that the UN is working on such important and crucial issues of the humanity in the time that there is wars, there is tensions, there is shocks, there is many things. That's a real chance for the UN and the multilateralism. And the UN is the heart, the beating heart of the multilateralism and its chance, because when wars are going on outside, we are shaping the way and the conditions for better world for next generations. I thank you.
Thank you again, sir. Ambassador Al-Thani, from your point of view, how can member states leverage the summit in Doha to make real change, much needed change, with so many people facing such profound social challenges?
Thank you so much. I mean, let me begin by showing our great support to the great efforts and the ongoing intergovernmental negotiations on reaching an outcome for the summit, which is within the political declaration, with the great efforts and able efforts of the co-facilitators, Ambassador Omar Hilal and Ambassador Sophia Smith of Belgium and Morocco. This is a very critical moment to bring us together to have a successful outcome in the summit. What a successful outcome should mean. We're not here negotiating a document, but we are negotiating an outcome that will reaffirm the synergy between the core themes of social development, which is eradicating poverty, providing work, the productive and decent work for all, and creating the social integration. So these are three important aspects that should be the heart of the political declaration. It should be action-oriented. It should be concise and action-oriented. We need key deliverables, actual deliverables on the ground. We need to keep in mind that these concrete actions are meant to improve lives. This is the end game. We are not negotiating for the purpose of negotiating. We are negotiating to improve lives of peoples and nations. So I think this is a key outcome that we need to keep in mind. And this brings me to Doha summit again is and this is why we look up to the success of providing the resources for the success of the bank. So this is why we are very much using before making sure it is a success. And this is why we are working closely together to make sure to have scientists to is a success. Dr. Gomez, so member state regulations and the outcomes of the finance conference.
Documents, high level participation in F54. It's a very good, the feeling is very good. Now, I think we can reach a participation, for example, of 60 head of state or head of government. It's very important. It's very important the participation in F54. Like I said, we need a strong message in F54 in Sevilla, and the participation as well as the private sector. But now maybe the geopolitical situation doesn't play in our favor. And now we need the leadership of the UN and the political leadership as well. For example, my prime minister is very, very involved in this process in F54. The world must reach the 4 trillion annual financing gap to rescue the SDGs. Is the message. And so we need to work with the stakeholders. Why UN? Because UN, we can work with the World Bank, IMF, the stakeholders, and maybe it's the best moment to respond the different countries now with fighting with the multilateralism. So it's an opportunity. I agree with my dear colleagues of Qatar, F54 and Social Summit. Maybe the most important process this year in UN is where we can respond the challenge. So the people, they are waiting for us, the member states. So term leadership, and leadership.
Mr. Lee, how is UN Justice supporting member states for both of these events?
Well, thank you. We are very grateful to the political leadership demonstrated by the member states. And also we are very grateful to the partnership demonstrated by the whole UN system. DESAT actually is doing a secretariat support, coordinating the whole UN system to provide our professional, analytical, and intergovernmental support first to the member states, led by the co-facilitators, and also negotiations, and definitely also to our hosts. And within the secretariat, we actually have launched interagency task forces, chaired by the Deputy Secretary General. Within these task forces, we conducted a cross-cutting discussions, brainstorming to consolidate inputs from the various UN entities, from the country level to regional level to global level, to inform the member states, to enrich their scope on the discussions and also define the final outcome. For instance, the latest version we are going to launch for the World Social Report. We, based on our assessment up to now,